Have you ever stopped to think why some people refuse to follow the crowd, even when everyone else is moving in the exact same direction, reacting in the same way, and seemingly agreeing on what should be done without question or hesitation? Why is it that they don't panic when others panic, don't rush when others rush, and don't conform when the pressure becomes almost impossible to ignore, as if they are operating under a completely different internal system? What exactly do they see that most people completely miss, overlook, or simply never take the time to question in the first place? Because if we are being honest, going against the crowd is not comfortable, it is not easy, and it rarely feels like the safe or logical choice in the moment when everything around you is pushing in the opposite direction. It is risky, unpredictable, and filled with uncertainty. It is lonely in ways most people are not prepared to experience. And sometimes it makes you look completely irrational, misunderstood, or even crazy in the eyes of everyone else around you. So the real question becomes, why do they still choose that path, despite all of this? The truth is, it has very little to do with confidence in the way most people understand it. It is not about being fearless or immune to doubt. It is about how they think at a deeper level that most people never develop. And once you begin to understand this way of thinking, you realize that you cannot go back to seeing the world the same way again. Because the crowd, as comforting as it may seem, is not designed to lead you toward extraordinary outcomes or unique results that stand out. The crowd is designed for safety, for predictability, and for outcomes that remain within a certain average range. Think about it carefully for a moment. If everyone is doing the exact same thing, following the same patterns, and making the same decisions, how could the result ever be different in any meaningful way? How could you possibly stand out by blending in so perfectly that you become indistinguishable from everyone else? The answer is, you cannot. Understand this, even if they cannot always explain it in words. They recognize something that most people ignore or avoid confronting. That comfort, while appealing, often acts as a hidden trap. And the moment you begin to prioritize comfort above growth, challenge, and independent thinking, you slowly start to lose control over the direction of your own life. But here is where it becomes even more interesting. These individuals do not reject the crowd simply out of rebellion or a desire to be different for the sake of it. They do not wake up every morning thinking about how to stand out or oppose what others are doing. They simply perceive reality in a different way. They question what others accept without hesitation. They pause in moments where others immediately react. They think critically in situations where most people operate on impulse. Let me ask you something that might feel uncomfortable. How many of the decisions you have made in your life were truly your own, based on your own thinking and evaluation? And how many were influenced, shaped, or even dictated by what everyone else around you was doing at the time? The career path you chose, the way you present yourself to the world, the goals you have been chasing, even the fears that hold you back, are they genuinely yours, or were they absorbed over time without you even realizing it? This is the exact point where a powerful shift in mindset begins to take place. People who do not follow the crowd develop a heightened awareness of influence in all its forms. They see it everywhere, from social media to conversations with friends and family, from cultural expectations to trends that seem harmless on the surface. And instead of absorbing all of it automatically, they filter it carefully. They consistently ask themselves one simple but powerful question: does this actually make sense for me? Not for everyone else, not for society, but for their own values, goals, and direction. And that single question is enough to separate them from the vast majority of people. Because most individuals never stop to ask it. They assume that if something is popular, it must be correct. If everyone is doing it, it must be safe and reliable. But popularity has never been a reliable indicator of truth. And safety does not guarantee success or fulfillment. In fact, some of the most significant mistakes in history occurred precisely because people chose to follow the crowd without questioning it. No one stopped to reflect. No one paused to analyze. No one stepped back and said that something did not feel right. That is the critical difference. Independent thinkers trust their ability to evaluate reality for themselves, even if they are not always correct. They do not outsource their thinking to the opinions of others. And that changes everything about how they move through life. Because when you stop outsourcing your thinking, you begin to take full responsibility for your choices and outcomes. And responsibility is not light or easy to carry. It means you can no longer blame the system, circumstances, or luck. You cannot hide behind excuses. If you fail, it is your responsibility. If you succeed, it is also your responsibility. And most people are not willing to carry that level of ownership. They prefer the comfort and protection of the crowd. Because when everyone fails together, it no longer feels like failure. It simply feels normal. But those who step away from the crowd make a different choice. They choose ownership over comfort. And that decision is what gives them real power. Now there is something important that often gets overlooked. Going against the crowd does not mean you will always be right. In fact, there will be times when you are completely wrong, and that is part of the process. But these individuals understand a crucial principle. Being wrong while thinking independently is far more valuable than being right while blindly following others. Because when you think for yourself, you learn at a much faster rate. You adapt more quickly. You grow more consistently. While others remain stuck in repeating the same cycles, you continue evolving. And over time, that difference compounds in ways that become impossible to ignore. This is why people who do not follow the crowd often appear to be behind at first, until suddenly they are far ahead of everyone else. And when that happens, people begin to question how it was possible. But it was never an overnight transformation. It was built gradually through consistent decisions, moment by moment, choice by choice. Every time they resisted the urge to conform, they strengthened their sense of identity. Every time they trusted their own judgment, they built real confidence. Not superficial confidence based on validation, but deep confidence rooted in experience. The kind of confidence that remains stable even under pressure. And speaking of pressure, this is where most people struggle the most. When everyone around you is moving in one direction, and you choose another, you feel the weight of that decision. You notice the looks, the comments, and the unspoken judgment. Even silence can feel overwhelming in those moments. And this is where mindset becomes critical. Because people who do not follow the crowd do not rely on the crowd for validation. They do not expect approval. They do not need agreement. They understand that thinking differently will naturally lead to being perceived differently. And they accept that reality. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Think about the individuals you admire the most, those who have changed industries, created something from nothing, or redefined what is possible. Do you believe they followed the crowd, or do you think they trusted a vision that no one else could fully see at the time? That is the mindset in action. They are not chasing approval from others. They are pursuing alignment with their own values, vision, and standards. And that is why they are capable of walking alone, without feeling lost. Because they are not guided by external noise. They are guided by internal clarity. But clarity does not come from endless thinking or analysis. It comes from action, from testing ideas, and from making decisions and learning from the outcomes. This leads to another key difference. People who do not follow the crowd take action more quickly. Not reckless action, but deliberate and decisive action. While others wait for certainty, they begin moving forward. And here lies an interesting paradox. They do not wait to feel confident before acting. They act first, and confidence develops as a result. Most people misunderstand this completely. They believe they must feel ready before taking the first step. They believe certainty is required. But certainty is an illusion, and those who understand this stop waiting for the perfect moment. They move forward anyway. They take the first step, then the next, and then another. And over time, they build momentum. And momentum is incredibly powerful. It carries you forward, even when motivation fades. It keeps you moving, even when doubt begins to surface. And eventually, it produces results. Results that validate their decisions. Results that silence external noise. Results that others often attribute to luck. But it was never luck. Now let us go even deeper. There is another layer that is rarely discussed. People who do not follow the crowd are comfortable being misunderstood. They accept that not everyone will understand their decisions, their vision, or their path. Because they recognize something that most people overlook. Being understood by everyone often means you are not challenging anything significant. If your ideas are immediately accepted by everyone, they are likely safe, predictable and expected. But meaningful change rarely feels comfortable in the beginning. It feels unfamiliar, risky, and sometimes even wrong until it proves itself over time. And that is why these individuals do not seek agreement. They seek truth, even if it isolates them, even if it costs them relationships, even if it requires more time and patience, because they are playing a long-term game. While most people focus on immediate approval, they focus on lasting impact. And that requires patience at a level most people are unwilling to develop. Because when you choose a path that goes against the crowd, results do not appear instantly. Sometimes things seem to get worse before they improve. Sometimes doubt becomes overwhelming. Sometimes you question everything. And in those moments, the temptation to return to the crowd becomes incredibly strong, to blend in, to feel safe again, to avoid the discomfort. And this is the defining moment, because most people give in at this point. They return to what is familiar, they abandon their path, and they convince themselves it was the right decision. But deep down they know the truth. They did not fail. They stopped too soon. But those who maintain their independent thinking do something different. They pause, they reflect, they adjust their approach, but they do not abandon their perspective. They strengthen it, and eventually, they break through. That is the pattern. It is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is not about certainty. It is about clarity developed through action. It is not about approval. It is about alignment. Now consider this question carefully. What would you do if you truly stopped caring about what the crowd thinks? What decisions would you make differently? What risks would you be willing to take? What path would you choose to follow? Because the truth is that most people already know what they want. They simply do not trust themselves enough to pursue it. They are waiting for permission, for validation, for someone to confirm that their path is correct. But that confirmation rarely comes, and when it does, it is often too late to act on it. Because the most valuable opportunities rarely appear obvious in the beginning. They appear uncertain, risky, and different. Exactly the kind of opportunities the crowd tends to avoid. So if you are following the crowd, there is a high chance you are avoiding the very things that could transform your life. Take a moment to reflect on that. The discomfort you are avoiding may be the exact doorway you need to walk through. The risk you are afraid of may be the opportunity you have been waiting for, and the path you have been ignoring may be the one that leads somewhere meaningful. This is the shift in mindset. It is not about rejecting everything around you. It is about making conscious choices. It is about thinking independently. It is about acting with intention. And yes, it is more difficult, but it is also far more rewarding. Because when you build your life based on your own decisions, you create something authentic. Something that truly reflects who you are, not what others expect you to be. And that is rare. In a world filled with noise, clarity becomes a form of power. In a world filled with imitation, authenticity stands out. And in a world filled with followers, those who think independently become leaders. So here is a simple challenge. Start small. Question one belief, one habit, or one decision. Do not accept it without reflection. Examine it, understand it, and then decide whether it truly serves you. Because that is how it begins. Not with a dramatic rebellion, but with a quiet shift in thinking. A shift that grows stronger over time. A shift that changes how you see everything around you. And eventually, a shift that changes your entire life. Because the moment you stop following the crowd is the moment you begin leading yourself. And once that happens, everything changes. So now the real question remains. Are you ready to think for yourself? Or will you continue walking the same path as everyone else around you?